In this video, we're going to be talking about factoring, and we're going to be talking specifically about factoring trinomials of this form. What this form means is, really, we have a 1 as a coefficient in front of our x squared term. In the next video, we're going to be talking about factoring trinomials that don't have a 1 in front of this x squared term, and it's a little bit more complicated. But for now, we're just going to start with x squared plus 5x plus 4. Now, typically when we factor trinomials, the first thing you want to do is say, is there anything that I can factor out of each one of these three terms? Any number? Is there an x in every single one of these terms that we can factor out? And the answer is no. There's nothing that we can really take out of every one of these three terms. Now, once you know that nothing can be factored out of every single one of these three terms, a trinomial of this form is always going to be factored into two binomials, and they're going to look like this. We're going to have x plus or minus something and x plus or minus something. Now for this very first example, I'm just going to give you the answer. The answer is going to be x plus 1 and x plus 4. Now what we need to do is look at that and see why that works, and then that'll give us an idea of how we can factor the rest of these in the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to check our answer to kind of get an idea of why this works. So if we had two binomials multiplied by each other, we know how to handle that now. We talked about it in the last chapter. What you do is you distribute, or what we call FOIL in this case, since this is two binomials. You multiply the first two terms, and you get x squared. You multiply the outer two terms, that's x times 4, that's 4x. 1 times x is the inner two terms, that's just an x. And when you multiply the last two terms, that's 1 times 4, you get 4. Now the question is this the trinomial that we started with? Well, it is. To get the trinomial that we started with, we just have to combine our like terms. If we combined our like terms, we'd have x squared plus 5x plus 4, and that is the trinomial that we started with, so that was the correct way to factor that trinomial. Now let's analyze this piece by piece. When we multiplied this thing back out, when we FOILed it back out, we had to do x times x. And that gave us our x squared term that we needed. So that was good. Now look at the last two terms that we multiplied together. We multiplied 1 times 4, and that gave us the 4 that we needed. Now to get this middle term here, this 5x, what we needed to happen was our two outer terms and our inner terms, the two like terms, had to add up to 5x. The way for that to happen is for the two numbers in our binomials to add to 5. So in general, when we're factoring a trinomial of this form, x squared plus bx plus c, what we're going to do is we're going to factor it into x plus or minus something here and x plus or minus something here. Now just to keep things general, and using all these letters might get a little bit confusing, but to keep things general, we'll call this x plus h and x plus k that we're factoring this thing into. Now, whatever these two numbers are, the rules are that these two numbers have to multiply to get c, and these two numbers have to add to get b. I'll write that down. There's our general rule for factoring trinomials of this specific form, x squared plus some number x plus another number. We factor it into two binomials, and those two numbers in the binomials, the h and k, they have to multiply to get c, and they have to add to get b. So if we look back at our previous example, we factored this trinomial into x plus 1 and x plus 4. Now 1 and 4, they multiplied to get 4, and 1 plus 4 adds to get 5, that middle term. Let's try another one. Let's try to factor x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now feel free to try to do this on your own. Hit pause if you need to. But we know that we're going to factor it into two pieces, and those things are both going to be binomials, and we're going to have an x at the beginning of each one of those two binomials. Now we need two numbers that are going to multiply to get 6. Two numbers go here and here that are going to multiply to get 6. So our options are 2 and 3 and 1 and 6. Those are really only the good options we have. Those two numbers also have to add to get 5. So let me put our options over here. We have 6 and 1 and 2 and 3. Now if we use 6 and 1, those don't add to 5, but 2 and 3 do add to 5. So the way to factor this polynomial is with an x plus 2 and an x plus 3. You could FOIL that thing back out to verify that it works, and it does. 2 times 3 is going to give us 6, and when we combine our like terms in the middle after FOILing, we're going to get a 5x. So here's another example for you. Let's factor x squared minus 3x minus 4. We have negatives this time. Now we know that we're going to factor this into 2 pieces, x plus or minus something and x plus or minus something. And we need 2 numbers that multiply to get negative 4. Well, we only have a couple options here too. We have negative 2 and 2. We have negative 4 and 1. And we have negative 1 and positive 4. Those are our options of numbers that multiply to get negative 4. Now, which one of those 3 options is going to add up to negative 3? Well, it's pretty easy to see that negative 4 and 1 are going to add up to negative 3. So what we put in here is a minus 4 and a plus 1. Now we don't want to lose track of what we're doing here. It might just seem like a number game that we have to play, but we don't want to forget that what we're doing is really the opposite of what we called FOILing in the previous videos. So what we should probably do every once in a while is check this and make sure that it works. So if we FOIL these 2 things out, we have x times x is x squared. The outer terms, 1 times x is a positive 1x. The inner 2 terms, negative 4 and x, give us a negative 4x. And the last 2 terms, negative 4 times 1, gives us a minus 4. Now combining the 2 like terms in the middle is going to give us x squared minus 3x minus 4. And that's the trinomial that we started with. So we know that this way of factoring this trinomial is correct. All right, let's look at another example that has a couple of complications in it. Let's factor negative 84 minus 9y plus 3y squared. One complication that's pretty easy to take care of is that these terms are kind of out of order. We usually like to write our terms in descending order of power, meaning the squared term would go first, positive 3y squared. The negative 9y would come next, and the negative 84 would come after that. Now the other complication here is we have a number in front of our squared term. We haven't had that yet. But you might notice that there is a factor of 3 in every single one of these terms that can be pulled out. So you start by saying, hey, every one of these terms is divisible by 3. So let's take that 3 out of the parentheses, and inside would go y squared minus 3y. And what's 84 divided by 3? I think it's 28. And now it's really easy to verify that if you multiply that back through the parentheses, multiply the 3 back through the parentheses, that you have what you started with. Now we can leave that 3 out there in all of our remaining steps. The question is, how do we factor this remaining trinomial? It's in the correct form, so we do it like we did before. So what are some numbers that multiply to get negative 28? Well, obviously there are a lot of them. I'll start a list. Negative 1 and 28, negative 28 and 1. We'll say negative 2 and 14 would multiply to get negative 28. Negative 14 and positive 2, of course. I don't think 28 is divisible by 3. It is divisible by 7, though. So negative 7 and 4 multiply to get 28. And negative 4 and 7 also multiply to get negative 28. I think that list is complete. So which one of those sets of 2 numbers adds up to negative 3? And it's pretty easy to see once you've got your list there that negative 7 and positive 4 would add to get negative 3. So we finish off this problem by putting in a negative 7 and a positive 4, and that's how you factor that trinomial. Okay, I think we're ready for a video quiz. Give that one a shot. It's pretty much like the one before it with different numbers and letters. We have a this time. But factor 2a squared minus 4a minus 70. Good luck.